Welcome, mystery seekers. So it's been a solid week since we've done a video. We wanted to take a nice leave of absence for the election to go by and allow those crazy energies to just sweep past, and so we can get right back into the topics that we normally do. So this week we decided, why not? Let's go Stargates. This is one of the weird ones. This is, stuff that's still ambiguous. There's some actual physical, ancient science behind how they work, but, they're still one of the phenomena of the ancient world that, has only really been explored through one TV show, and we can all kind of agree that's cheesy as fuck. Except the movie. The movie's okay, but the show and the other seasons and the other spin-off shows after that just got weird. But yeah. So just decoding the Stargate phenomena. So first things first, what is a Stargate? Junk, do you want to take it away?
Of course, and welcome back. We are happy to have all of you. Thank you for your patience and holding space. Yeah, this is going to be a deep topic, and I know it's been on a lot of people's minds. We've been seeded with, just as Scuba said, mainstream media, movies, television shows to kind of preface what a Stargate is, but it goes much deeper, and we're going to be exploring that today. So on the surface level, just to lay a foundation, a Stargate is essentially ancient advanced technology that serves as a portal into a different space-time locale. So this could range anywhere from jumping continents to jumping planets to jumping galaxies. And again, the term Stargate is basically just relative of where the other end of the gate lies. So it's a fascinating phenomena to think that we could be transporting ourselves beyond physical limitations, and to think that this has been an ongoing phenomena for centuries, thousands of years. I mean, it's really ancient. That's what we need to get across to you today, is that this isn't some new technology that the government created in their basement. This is some real stuff, and we have lots of evidence to provide to you, but all you need to know is that a Stargate is a portal from A to B.
And one of the easiest ways to kind of understand how you quote unquote dial in their, what locale you're going to, the easiest way that I've understood it is, think of it like an IP address where you have your galactic or universal coordinates, you have your local or solar system coordinates, and then you have your planetary coordinates, which will basically, tell you where you're going to go in the galaxy and how that's mapped. Now, as far as the logistics of that all, I have no idea. But as far as boiling it down in a basic terms that, we can kind of get a grasp here on Earth, and not really just here on Earth, but in our third density reality, I would say an IP address. Junk, would you concur on that, or am I kind of just blowing that out of the water?
No. So the interesting thing. Oh, I'm getting feedback. Hello? Testing, testing. So the interesting thing about Stargates is that there's many modalities for opening and operating them, of which we'll discuss as we go along. But intention is key. Direction is key. One of the things that is probably a misconception is that you just enter a Stargate and go to a miscellaneous location. And that's not the case. These have been prepped with intention, designed and built with intention, and with that same intention, you can navigate the highway of energy.
So how do they function in their basic form, and how do we even know of this information? So as we said, you basically put in a coordinate, and it opens up, and you walk through it, and it's essentially fluid. You don't you it depending upon the the level of advancement of said gate, the level of travel could be very different, as well as your vibration too. If your vibration isn't fully there, it isn't tuned very specifically, you may just phase out. You may not even be able to handle going through this level of travel, if I am correct.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, vibration is paramount, because what you have to realize is that there wouldn't just be a Stargate on in Times Square or something, and people could just walk in and go to Arcturus or something like that. This is more of a sacred passing, an in the know passing. As it's become more occult, and but in the ancient days, it was kind of like only those who were permitted access were able to cross through. And vibration is essential because you allow your vibration. Let me think if I can create an analogy for this. It's like taking a broken car, something that clearly needs an oil change or is missing a tire, and trying to jump through on a highway versus driving through in a sports car. You want to have a vehicle that properly suits this kind of travel. And as you can see, in the more metaphysical aspects, which it used to begin with in its origins, the traversal began as an activation of the light body, and it was actually a more holistic, organic transference. Now, we're going to get into how stargates have evolved since ancient days, but for now, all you need to know is that your energy is a main facet of this experience. And if you're not attuned or equalized or are balanced internally, then you're going to come across some distortion. You might have a bumpier ride, quote unquote, to speak. So it's about creating a proper equilibrium within yourself so that you can actually permit and access these gateways.
And I just want to read the first paragraph of the middle graphic because it's so important to this idea. When stargates and portals activate, the counter-rotating electromagnetic spiral pair merges to form a Merkaba vehicle. Its center becomes a form constant still point that links various space-time locations directly to each other, creating a trans-time bridge. I know that's a mouthful and a lot of big words, but Junk, let's talk about very specifically what is a Merkaba vehicle.
Well, yeah, as you can see to the graphic on your left, the Merkaba is not only a form of sacred geometry, but it's two opposing tetrahedrons. And when they counter rotate, just as Scuba said, it creates a 0-point centered equilibrium of which you can place items or even people, mostly people. But this is basically, if you can imagine, like you're a bubble to traverse the cosmos. And it's personal. It's not like you can fit two people in there. This is like an activation within yourself in the more organic. And again, we're going to differentiate between the inorganic in a minute, but we're talking about the ancient stargates. This was a very powerful transference of consciousness. Okay. This is basically you materializing and having a vehicle form around you, carry you to another destination in physical form, almost instantaneous. And again, we're going to get into that experience in a moment, but basically you would activate this, and the point of convergence is right at the heart center. So right where your heart sits is where the opposing tetrahedrons would actually have that medium. So very, very powerful, very sacred stuff. And it's sad that we've since forgotten how powerful we truly are. But this is the case of a mystery school. You guys are here to remember, and we hope that this resonates. Again, feel free to input anything you have at the end. We're going to be opening the format so we can have free flow. But just for now, all you need to know is that stargates are inorganic and organic, and primarily in the ancient days, they were organic mediums of consciousness, and that would create / materialize a double opposing tetrahedron, otherwise known as the Merkaba vehicle, to carry you safely to the other side.
So, from a scientific perspective, you can think of a Stargate as a wormhole, and it allows travel from one destination to the other. Quite simply speaking, like Scuba was saying, it uses coordinates. But the difference between artificial and I want to say natural stargates is that an artificial stargate most of the time will require two artificially created stargates, right? So you can't just create one stargate and then travel where you want to go and be able to travel back and forth. If you were to just create one stargate artificially, you might just end up at a random point if you don't have a like super advanced knowledge on the coordinates and what you're doing and how it operates. And more importantly, you probably won't be able to get back unless there's a naturally occurring Stargate there that's stable enough to stay open all the time, but that is extremely rare. So understanding what a wormhole is, it's like a vortex, if anyone understands quantum entanglement on a quantum level, right?
We'll go
There
into
is
that
a
later. We'll go
oh
into that later.
yeah, but so that's the gist of what a Stargate is. Um, some people explain it differently using black holes, but I think that's the same concept as a wormhole. So that's my 2 cents on what a Stargate is from the more sci-fi or sciencey perspective.
So, what did the movie / show get right, and what did it get wrong? So, one of the big things that it did get right is the idea of the artificial gates, and perfectly encompassing how they work, how they function, and the subtle notion that it was controlled by an extraterrestrial race with some Egyptian, hold on one second, with some Egyptian origins, but ultimately what it really, really got wrong was the type of race it was. There was no way that they were malicious. And, them finding the way that it did, I mean, that's, it's kind of realistic, but in a sense, not, because, we're talking about something that is, would be the most fascinating thing to ever find in the history of mankind. That's more important than, in my opinion, than any UFO that has ever come, because that's not traveling in a ship. That's basically teleporting. So, you can't get any faster than just snapping there or walking through something, and you were at one place before and you're at another place next. So it was very fantastical and action packed, and then the show just got extremely cheesy. Now, although there are a lot of hidden truths in the show, behind the cheese, but it's as we have become, comms people and looking at, the subtle symbolism throughout all media, throughout all music, pretty much throughout every facet of our lives, just going down the street and seeing some businesses, you see the symbols and you're just like, Jesus Christ, why? So, we can't help ourselves to find the symbolism if our eyes awake. We can't help ourselves. It is in our nature. So, you will find the symbolism there, but just know that, there's a level of trying to tomfoolery there, because we got to remember it is the victors of what happened in those events back then, because they were very war-torn times back then. As you really go back into the ancient history and understand that this planet has seen a lot of war and a lot of cataclysm. Man, I'm sorry. All right. Did anybody else want to continue? Junk, I know you know nothing about Stargate or the show. That's fine. Matt, do you know anything about the show or movie?
Other than watching it and enjoying it, no.
Okay. Has anybody else seen Stargate, the movie and or show?
I have both of them.
Okay. Do you know what I'm talking about, Hope, when I mean there's like subtle differences, there's like subtle symbolism, but there's so much cheese that you have to go through it and take your time with it?
I think they made it so that it would be entertaining as to the way society saw our current world and how it was being projected that existed on the other side. Good and the bad.
Absolutely. So what area of the world are they most known to be located in? Junk, do you want to take away on this one?
Everywhere. Basically, what you're looking at right here is a map that was disclosed from, I believe it was Russian intel and translated into English. But basically, it's a compilation of every tracked Stargate that we know of, essentially. And as you can see, they follow a very distinct pattern, if you do look closely, that they almost all lie upon the ley lines of the planet, which we've talked about in the past, of being of high significance, very dense, vibratory, energetic spaces of the planet. And to think that they were planted here, as well as the pyramids and everything else that kind of correlates with these lines, makes sense. So you're seeing it everywhere. This is an international phenomena. It's not just located in the US. It's pretty much everywhere. And it's typically in most of the ancient civilizations that we relate to having some kind of impossible capabilities in their architectural design as well, as you will see. But yeah, just soak up this picture, realize that the Stargate phenomena isn't just one Stargate. There are many, and it's a very ancient series of foundations that have been laid.
And if anybody wants me to send them this graphic, please send me a DM or screenshot it. Do whatever you can to get a copy of this, because
Oh yeah, it's scrubbed off the internet. Yeah, people, they do not want you to have this.
You want to just put that in the Mystery School chat?
Yeah, I will. After this recording, I will put this image and a bunch of other images in the lounge for everybody to do as what they wish. So yeah, soak this one in. And
I will say, Scuba, just really quick, that although you do see a bunch of pinpointed dots and labelings, this is a map of active and inactive Stargates, meaning that they are no longer working into our degree of accessibility. They may have in the past, but they have just been plotted on this map. So, you have to dive deep to kind of figure all of it out. There's a lot to dig through, but both active and inactive.
And I also want to make note, this does not just do Stargate. As I'm looking at the key, it does wormholes, it does Jehovian seals, inner Earth. It maps out inner Earth. Like, goodness, okay, that's interesting. Earth's 12 Q sites, CUE, but the map key on it is Q, and inner Earth at Stargates. So that's fascinating. But they
I
have an
wonder
X over
if you
them,
could
so they're
find, like,
probably
patterns on this.
inactive. Huh?
'Cause, I said I wonder if you could find like patterns on this for like UFO sighting, because there are
Oh
places
yeah, I'm sure.
on the earth that you go there, like you spend like a week there, it's guaranteed you're gonna see UFO activity, and like you'll see them jumping through portals or stargates or whatever the heck they are in the skies. And so there's different, I don't know, whatever ley lines that these are. There's definitely some sort of significance to it. It's really amazing.
Absolutely. Are they locked in a specific position, or can they be moved and still work the same? So this kind of goes into the idea of, what the movie kind of put forward, and the kind of idea that the Iraqi government, or not the Iraqi government, but the US government did in Iraq during 03, and it wasn't just, for oil, and it wasn't just for 9/11. They also were looking for ancient technologies that were of Stargate origin. Junk, would you like to expand a little bit? Can they essentially be moved? How, is there any, physical way for them to, operate, or are they, locked in their position?
Well, as you're going to see in the next few slides, there are ones, primarily the ancient ones, that have been forged through stone. And again, these are almost immovable objects, to say the least. But at the same time, the Stargate is just as powerful as the land it sits upon, because there is an energy resonance there. So I would say, in terms of an artificial Stargate, the reverse engineered construction of one, yes, mobile, kind of militarized probably. But in cases of these ancient ones, no, they're planted for the long haul. And it's for that reason, especially with the axial tilt of Earth and everything, that they've kind of lost the essence, and that's why they're almost inactive. So I would say, to that degree, that yes and no, they can be moved. It depends on if it's a man-made construction or if it's of mysterious origin, and if it's carved into stone, because you can't just move them out. So
Right. So in this graphic that we're seeing here, and you answered the question perfectly, and since it's on the screen, what are we looking at here? Because I don't personally understand the whole idea of the keys. What that's new to me.
Okay, so this is where it gets interesting. This is something that we've all pretty much speculated, especially over time through our Anunnaki series, etc. But not only were we able to access these stargates with our vibration and energy alone, as well as other things, there were specific artifacts that we found over time that served to open these gateways. And again, this is ancient technology, so it's very mysterious, but at the same time, you can take a look here at Rodney Stone, and it has all the calculations. This is basically a direct portal to the Pleiades. And it's a fascinating understanding that we can have a certain object held by a user, imbued by a user, and to allow the activation of a Stargate. So again, and I'm not sure if it's on the next slide you have, but we have other examples of this. Yeah. So as you can see off to your left, another artifact that would be considered a Stargate key, something that would allow accessibility. The most famous one, though, of course, is the Sumerians holding their little, what would you like to call them, Scoop? Purses? Their little
Handbags, purses.
handbags.
I see. Personally, I feel like they were some type of, tablet or some type of, what we think of right now as, kind of those little handbags for tablets. I don't feel like that was just like a little bag that they carried around. I just feel like that's just the general shape that they could come up with back then. And, because they're carving it in stone, so they don't really have the best possible detail. But I don't know, it feels weird because if you notice his thumb, it's very focused. It's very focused. It's not like he's gripping it to make a fist. He's holding it like this. So I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, essentially, you see that again when we dive back into our Anunnaki series. Only those of the chosen could hold these bags. So the thing is, who else would be allowed access to and from different planets, galaxies, than those in power? So I believe this is also a power symbol as well as like something you have to earn. But yeah, we have gates. And then one of my favorites, absolute favorites, is crystalline keys. So this is basically using crystals charged with the same resonance of the Stargate. And I've had, different visions of this being in use. I've had somebody close to me who channels artwork actually explain the full process by which there was an element of crystal, there was an element of water, and it was almost like you looked into the water to see yourself in a different place, and that would be the intentional focus. That would be the compass that you set. So absolutely fascinating, but we'll just let you ponder this in your mind that stargates were opened not only energetically, just with your own being, but with analog artifacts such as these Stargate keys.
What's kind of funny? I just had like I don't know, a download or imagination, whatever you want to call it, of the bag being used or whatever device being used to open the Stargater portal, much like the Rick and Morty gun that Rick uses, where it shoots like a beam of light and then the portal opens up. So I don't know if that's anything you had seen depicted, Junk.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it's kind of like on command. So one of the things that we have to also talk about is how when stargates are inactive, they're stoic. They may just seem like a carving. They may just seem like an archway. But the thing is, it takes an activation. It takes intention, as we stated at the beginning. So I believe that even bringing these artifacts close together with one another is the activation of that technology.
Okay. So what form of technology do they utilize? So this is fascinating. As we've talked about, there are two different types. There's the natural, and then there's the artificial militaristic. So the militaristic kind of is kind of acting itself like an antenna, kind of trying to, hijack itself onto the natural one's pathway. But essentially, a Stargate works as there's a galactic nervous system that it just kind of spreads out through. It goes everywhere. There's a very specific type of stream. It's, I would say it would be vibrating. It would exist in the 9th density, maybe even in a 10th density. It would be in a type of density that would take, so many millennia for you to reach. And in a sense, there's really even no reason for you to see it because you're just going to be traveling through it. It's so instantaneous, you wouldn't even need to want to see it.
I
Junk,
think
do you want to
good
go
depiction
for it,
of
man?
the galactic stargates. Anyone has seen Galaxy of the Guardians, they do a really good depiction of jumping through portals or stargates. In my opinion, I think they do a pretty good job of that. So as far as the visuals go.
You're breaking up and you are quiet.
Oh, I said a good visual representation would be the Galaxy of the Guardians. I think they do a good job with the galactic stargate.
Very cool. Yeah, you're not wrong. Junk, do you want to expand a little bit further on the galactic filaments?
Of course, this is actually the exciting part that I was waiting for. So what you need to realize is that everything that is manifested within space-time, within the third dimension, of course, because there are many layers to this universe, is very intentional. And we always come back to that concept. But what we talk about is on a macrocosmic scale, galaxies are not randomly dispersed throughout space, right? They follow they follow these hives of energy. It's like a webbing. And along this webbing, they kind of converge with each other. And this is a real thing. You can look it up, galactic filaments, but it basically are energetic highways that bridge each galaxy together. So when we're talking about a Stargate, it's not that you're just going through, let's say, like for example, like Frogger, like you're not just gonna like hop across the freeway. There is a specific path for you to follow, and it's almost instantaneous. And this is what you're visualizing right now, because these are real pictures. You are seeing the direct path or route that you would take along a Stargate. So let's take the bottom image, for example. That center dot that you're looking at, if you wanted to go from point A to the dot off to the right, you would follow that stream of energy. That's what you traverse through. That is the portal. As Xenox mentioned earlier, that's the wormhole. So it's fascinating to think. And I also got I used to I channeled a post a while back about Stargates, and I had this pretty interesting thing about the actual transference process. But I basically stated like this: traversal through these ancient Stargates could be compared to a psychedelic trip, as the ride to another side was extremely turbulent and disorienting. Since many of the ancient civilizations were more in tune with their consciousness, this transference was more of a normalized occurrence. So we have to realize this jumps back to our concept of what we talked about being vibrationally and energetically sound, having some stability, because while it is almost instantaneous, you crossing through the other side could do many things to your physical body. Especially, it's kind of like the astronaut who didn't train and went straight to space, and how that ended up, going through the cyclotron and everything. So basically what we're talking about here is prepare yourself. And again, we're not talking about like go out and find a Stargate and go through it. We're basically just talking about how it was used and how they activate. But I can almost guarantee that any recruits within these kind of black budget projects that the deep state or the secret government actually have going on with their artificial Stargates have prepared for these jumps through insanely intense preparation, probably more so the Marines. And it takes that level of stability and grounding to actually make it to the other side unscathed. So I would just like to say that, but it's also absolutely fascinating to think that our universe is connected. This is only exaggerating the point too, that unity is all around us, that we are never separate, that we are always connected. No matter if you look up in the night sky and see stars, several light years away, you are just as connected to that place as you are here. and stargates were the way the ancients used to traverse the cosmos.
May I ask a question?
Go for it.
So, Junk, would this then perhaps be a travel possibility for like the super soldiers?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I'm glad you said that, because it's not just limited to personal travel, meaning it's, physical form. They send equipment through these stargates as well. This is how they've kind of colonized the solar system, and they've done different things on different planets, different stars. There's talks. I mean, I've heard this through many different avenues, but there's talks that they're already within Andromeda. So who knows how far they've taken this and what they've done. But all we know is that there has been active travel to the moon. There's been active travel to Mars, and possibly with alliances to many other extraterrestrial bodies. So we would like to say that super soldiers, yes, would be a great candidate for this as well. But they've been working on this technology ever since they found it. And how long do you think that's been? And it's hard to say, because the wars that have gone on, say in Iraq, for different things, mass destruction, you have to see the ancient significance of left behind remnants and ruins, and what that would actually do to unlock that technology. You would transcend the world. The modern world would be no longer within, your hindsight. You would be so far ahead of everything. And I have no doubt in my mind that they've created these, and we'll actually talk about some later on. But yeah. Scoob, you're
Wow,
muted.
I've been muted the whole time. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna go back. Can we guess how old these gates are and what civilizations most used them in ancient times? Basically, everybody. It was everywhere. There was not a civilization during ancient times, and I'm meaning basically before 12,000 years, before the absolute total cataclysm that annihilated everything. They were used absolutely everywhere. There was not a continent on the planet that did not use them. They were all in different shapes, forms, and sizes, as Junk said. Them being made into stone, there was really no way to, actually move them, but their constructions are very specific and very unique. Junk, you were in the Giza Plateau. Did you actually see any hieroglyphs that depicted stargates in the Egyptian plateau?
No, but surprisingly, I found a lot of sacred geometry out there. It was crazy. I saw lots and lots of things. But one of the things I want to emphasize here, as you can see off to the left, the way we can kind of calculate when the viability of these stargates were active is just by the sheer size alone. Humanity in general was a smaller population. So, I mean, again, you look at something like Petra, which would be almost an ancient giant, stargate. But here in Gate to the Gods in Peru, basically this, it's really tiny opening with a very interesting center, which looks like you would maybe put a key there. But it just showcases that humans were a lot smaller to access these gateways, therefore leading back thousands of years in time to kind of dilate and kind of calculate when these were actually in use. But again, that's a good point too to make, is that there are giant stargates and there are also these kind of stargates. So it makes you wonder if the Anunnaki were preserving theirs and they've created these massive, elegant archways. And if anybody's seen Petra, it's gorgeous. Scuba, I'm not sure if you have a picture of Petra, but yeah, we could dive into that another time. Maybe I'll post it in the mystery school. But absolutely beautiful. You have this, amazing facade of a giant-esque kind of sacred sanctity, sanctuary. And as you go in, it's absolutely empty, but it has giant, enormous cavities in the walls. And it could be determined that this was maybe the entranceway of Stargates in the past. Now, another thing to mention too is that we had, so specifically with the one you're seeing off to the left, right? This is the Hayu Marca Gate of the Gods. And this is in Peru. And what's interesting about it is that they speak, there's basically native speaking, like tales that are told throughout, generations of the key of the gods of seven rays. Now, this is fascinating because we've talked about the seven rays before and how that connects with consciousness, but also they had this gate key that was shaped like a golden disc. And now in this alcove, as you can see below on the left, there is a void in the rock that actually fits that key perfectly. So it's hard to tell if they've actually tried reconnecting the key or if it's more or less null and void because of the actual placement of the Earth and the axial tilt. But what I can tell you is that there was both an organic modality of accessing these gates as well as an inorganic kind of key and hole format. So it's absolutely fascinating. And again, these are everywhere. As you can see off to the right, you have one in Sri Lanka, with actually so on the bottom left of that image to the right, you actually have this inscribed on the wall, which kind of looks like, as you said, Scuba, earlier, some kind of coordinates, kind of letting you know what would happen if you walked through this gate, where you would go. And it's fascinating. The ancients knew so much about the cosmos.
I was muted again. If you really look at the zoomed out photo of the Gate of the Gods, it almost looks like there was some kind of damage or explosion that happened to it, because those cracks and those patterns are very, very specific.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is like really powerful technology. So just imagining falling into the wrong hands or having maybe a domineering race want to rid the technology from the planet. Good speculation.
Because it's also noticed, if you look at the rock specifically above, where the keyhole is, it looks very damaged and blown out compared to everything else around it.
Maybe it was
Yeah,
intentional.
maybe there was some sort of energetic disaster while the Stargate was active that caused like an energy outburst.
Who knows?
Yeah, or disaster. But you're right, it is obviously not natural because of how straight the lines are and how symmetrical it is.
You did put in a picture of the Petra.
So there you go. Off to the left again. If you can see that in the bottom left of the left image, you see a person in the frame. Just size comparison. Just look at that. It's insane. Yeah, that little tiny dot right there. That's a human.
Right here?
Yeah.
Oh my.
So basically what you're realizing, I mean, just look at the entranceway. It looks like a Sumerian style kind of royal entrance. And although the one off to the right, the Midas Anidi in Turkey, is semi-larger than the one in Peru, it still takes like a smaller form. But look at the sheer size of that facade. That it just screams significance. Now, what's fascinating is another vision I had was that when the Stargates open, almost like the Stargates SGM1 saga, it wouldn't necessarily be kind of like you seeing the other side, but almost like a heat wave texture overlay. And I don't know, you can take that as it is, but just fascinating to think that somebody could walk in and disappear completely off. I mean, again, inside Petra's, there's nothing else. It's you walk in and there's these hollows, and beyond that, it's just a carve in a mountain. That's it. And till today, it hasn't been destroyed. So what does that tell you? That's another thing too. So
Has anyone ever done LiDAR on the Petra?
what is that?
Has anyone ever done LiDAR on the Petra?
What is LiDAR?
It's basically the satellite imaging that they use to find the lost cities in the Amazon.
Not sure, but from what I saw, and I watched a documentary on this, basically going really deep and close up to the walls. Not only was this like technically impossible for ancient tools to even create, let alone carve, because it's a literal mountain face, but it's so precise and it's so smooth that they really wonder who was the constructors, who were the architects of this. And it just seems that, you know, to have something this magnificent and like just huge wouldn't just be fit for a smaller race of beings. It's more or less for giants.
And the mainstream science community would have you think that they did all that with stone, sticks, and tin, and at the most brass. I don't even think they had brass back then.
Oh yeah, you can't forget wet sand.
Oh yeah, what the heck?
Using wet sand to transport all of the stone.
There have been people who have literally tried to carve stuff out of the rocks in Egypt using the technology they had back in the days. It's literally impossible. There's a tourist attraction in Egypt where you go to some of the rock, and part of the tradition or tourist trap is that you bang on rock using some of the primitive tools dozens or hundreds of times to see how difficult it was. But the thing is, there have been thousands of people that go there, and there's barely any kind of you know, shape or dent that's been made. Now there are techniques for splitting rocks that are primitive. Um, if you have ever seen like the metal pegs being hammered into rocks, that's a
But
good
not
technique.
laser precision.
But yeah, it's not laser precision like this.
But I also want to make note, it is quite possible, and I'm sure Junk can attest to this, that the surrounding pyramids in the Giza Plateau were made by humans. But the main Great Pyramid, no. No way.
No, it's too perfect. Again, I was there, they're active, but jumping into Stargates, there is one that I forgot to include, which is one in Bolivia called Gate of the Sun. And this is an archway sculpted basically from a single block of stone. And around its edges, there's images of like strange winged figures with their like tails curled up. And they also have helmets. So strange. But another thing about this is that it's like, so, okay, the monument is basically complete with the sun god on the top with beams of sunlight like shining through the opening. But interestingly enough, something that Xenox alluded to is that there's a mysterious large crack directly above where the sun would be. So it's almost like either something went wrong, either that Stargate was misused and therefore the energy kind of disabled the location by destroying itself, or it was personally destroyed. Either way, a lot of the locals know about it and they still refer to it as a Stargate, which is absolutely fascinating.
And one thing I do want to make note is that it's quite possible that, during the 12,000 year, I'm just going to call it cataclysm because it went on for many, many, many years. So we'll just say the 12,600 year period was just like a cataclysm period. But from what I understand, and what could possibly have happened to a lot of these stargates, I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of them, is that during that time they were fully active, they were fully in use, and then boom, the cataclysm happened, and things throughout the world started failing. Systems started failing, and they inevitably caused themselves to explode. And then getting a giant rush of water, and or getting flooded out, earthquakes, whatever ended up happening. I would say more or less in the Egypt area, I would say a massive flood or in a massive drought, but I would say more of or either a massive flood or many, 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 many years of heavy rain that caused bunches of erosion. And that's going by what Robert Schoch has said, the guy who basically looked at all of the erosion on the Sphinx and all of the areas around the Giza Plateau and said, wait a minute, that's water erosion, and that feels like that's caused by heavy rain, because a lot of what's around, feels as though that it, you know, de- you know, not decayed, but eroded over time versus being rushed in by a massive wave like you see in other areas. So it's fascinating to think about. How does quantum entanglement fit into all of this? And is this idea go into transference of matter? So I know, Matt, you've been waiting on this one.
Okay.
Go into it.
So I'm gonna read a little bit out of this webpage. And it starts with the question: what is the link between quantum entanglement and a wormhole? And so wormholes, as they define it in space-time continuum, are a great method of rapid movement between different parts of the universe, uh, synonymous with the Stargate. Um, but these wormholes are described in space-time theory as what they call an Einstein-Rosen bridge. And this represents a deformation of the space-time continuum. And how that works is using a phenomenon called quantum entanglement. And this is stuff that's studied and experimented and done today in modern time in mainstream science. And physicists such as at the Washington or the University of Washington and Stony Brook University in New York, etc., etc. And it's known and openly talked about that these two phenomena are linked. Quantum entanglement is one of the most unexplained phenomenon. As Albert Einstein explained, he calls it, quote, spooky action at a distance, end quote. Some of you may have heard that already. Um, and in layman's terms, the phenomenon can be described as, let's say you have a particle or a group of particles, and you subject that particle to an impact or movement or whatever. They notice that that particle will begin to affect another particle that it's linked to, but these links are very specific. Um, it's just not random. Well, not to say that it isn't random, but it's not chaotic. It's specific. It's intentional almost. Um, and that's when you get into coordinates and all that kind of stuff. But these particles react, and they have no explanation. Well, you could have one particle in the room where you're sitting, and that other particle could be on Mars, and you affect that particle, the other particle will react, and that's why they call it spooky action at a distance, because these two things in space-time are linked. Let's see. Yes, they are also entangled on the quantum level. Um, and they talk about tiny black holes. Um, let's see. Oh, black holes are also known to have quantum entanglement, which is pretty neat because then you get into the theory of how black holes might be portals or um, all that kind of stuff. But that's the little rundown on quantum entanglement. Does anyone have anything to add with that while I dive a little deeper?
Junk, do you want to give your idea on quantum entanglement before we open the floor?
No, I think Xenox pretty much summed it up. But what you have to realize and really gain from that description is that stargates are interconnected. And that's how this phenomena actually happens. It allows matter to be almost in two places at once, but then materialize or slash manifest into a different space. But you know, Scuba, one thing I really wanted to talk about, which is one of the biggest aspects of stargates, is modern day stargates. I know I didn't make a slide for this, but I wanted to mention it. I did send you a little picture that you can check out right there. But basically, when we talked about inorganic stargates, we're talking about the reverse engineering of portals. And this could either be through siphoning knowledge from a tribe, a civilization, lesser powered one, and gaining the knowledge that way, or they actually did some scientific study and they found out how to do it. But in modern day, a stargate isn't known as a stargate. It's known as a jump room. This is the term that they use. And so the most current one that I knew about, and it's not operated by Square Enix anymore, which is a video game company, but is the jump room in 999 El Segundo, which is basically a city in Los Angeles. Now, flip those nines around, what do you get? And so, and it's in pure red, by the way. But essentially, sorry, what?
It was my first. I mean, it's the 666.
Yeah, and it's in red. Yeah, they know what they're doing. Okay, so basically, the jump rooms are more modified to kind of encounter the psyche in a more natural way. So instead of walking through a stone archway, or as SG1 put it, a giant circular portal, what was interesting is that they reduced the psychological damage by restructuring the room with a door, with a physical kind of like walk in your house kind of door, to do less psychological damage and to allow the person to have an easier time transitioning without, you know, truly understanding what was happening. So what happened is, you know, they gave them like a key to use to open the door. And as they unlocked the door, there was a direct transition with atmospheric pressure in the room to match the density of their to-be location. And now this is interesting too, because say, for example, you go to Mars, there's going to be a different atmospheric pressure, despite if you're indoors in some kind of pressurized habitable environment, you're going to notice a difference. So they immediately sense that. You would open it up, walk through. Again, it would just be a mirror of the room that you were in, and you'd walk out and you're in an entirely different place. And to see how these have kind of been militarized, you'd walk into another military base. And this is how they've transitioned. This is how, you know, high profile figures in the government have made it to Mars instantaneously. There's no need for rocketry. That's why when you hear Scuba mention a lot of the time, the conversation about Elon Musk is the archaic nature of rockets. Waiting 6 months to go in something that could potentially kill you, just spending billions of dollars to do it, rather than just opening a door and being there. So that's where stargates are in the current day. And it's just fascinating to think that how far they've advanced and evolved from these ancient stone structures into a more modern architectural design. They really wanted to ease the mind along this passing. They didn't want to make it so overwhelming to the experiencer. Again, they had to be kind of selected, as we heard earlier with super soldiers and whatnot, but they were basically sanctioned to walk into the room, walk through the door, and enter upon their newly found atmosphere environment, which happens to be lots of places in our solar system, but quite possibly beyond our galaxy. And that's where it really gets interesting. But just taking a look at your screen right now and seeing which building it's hidden in just makes you realize that there is also a satanic element to this as well. So just connect the dots on that one.
Yeah.
And-
One thing I wanted to add, back on the sciencey aspect, I read something really cool. So, when you get into quantum entanglement, and wormholes and stuff, they describe in the third dimension, a wormhole is simply just like an energetic string between 2 points in space, but somehow when it's changed into a fourth dimensional uh, thing, uh, that's when it becomes a wormhole. So I suppose when you that's why it requires that level of technology, because you're literally taking something from the 3D and turning it into a fourth dimensional uh, object or energy. A little beyond our linguistic comprehension, but you get what I'm saying.
To a degree, yes.
Yeah.
I do also want to make note. These artificial stargates, from what I observed just from this evening and from my own research, once we get the technology to be able to manipulate matter, which is coming very soon, and sooner than we like to think. We sit here and hear the media and the experts say that this is hundreds of years away, and there's no way that we could do it any uh, closer. But thing of it is that every single matter in the universe vibrates at a specific resonance, and when you start to map out that resonance and create a device that tunes into that resonance, you can be able to manipulate it any way you choose. So, with that said, once we get the ability to manipulate matter, all of these stone stargates can be easily repaired. And that's an interesting thing to really think about is, there's a reason why the ancients built these in stone, because they last. They can last cataclysms. They can last hundreds of years worth of rain because it's stone. Some of the most powerful elements in the universe are made of stone. So, something to think about. And with that, we have finished the main talk of the evening. But we